Sometimes I used to spend the afternoons in the bookstores or libraries reading. But I did not study much, just because I had to, unless the subject interested me. I had realized that paying attention to the lessons in the classroom was the secret to having more free time in the afternoon. I liked chemistry, I really do. In fact, I often read the next chapters in advance. Knowing of my interest in NLP, one day a friend sent me a video of a lecture of about 8 hours long on NLP and graphology. I was immediately fascinated by graphology. It almost became an obsession. I read everything I could find on that subject until I ran out of information. I occasionally enjoyed analyzing the writing of friends and classmates. I had developed such an ability that one day with some friends I was talking about graphology, and a decidedly skeptical friend of mine gave me a small shopping list that she had in her purse. From the few lines on that paper, I deduced that this handwriting belonged to some reserved person. The handwriting was very uncertain, the line a little shaky, of a person quite introverted, reserved, closed in herself, probably sometimes sharp in dealing with people. "How strange," I said to her. "It doesn't match your personality at all." She nods her head and says, "Indeed, it is my sister's, and it is exactly as you describe her." I am impressed. At university, I enrolled in biology and soon graduated with full marks. I chose biology because pure chemistry seemed too boring. Moreover, over the years, I developed an interest in cells, DNA, and microorganisms, and after a master's in medical biology, again with flying colors, I was quickly hired by the BioLuxMed laboratory in Los Angeles. It was a very advanced laboratory, partly financed by the state and partly by private companies. We performed analysis and consultancy services for chemical pharmaceutical multinationals and small companies. But above all that, we had a privileged collaboration with the Pentagon and Department of Defense. Basically biomedical research for military purposes. Sometimes this allowed some of us to see confidential and top-secret documents, like, for example, research regarding vibrational waves and their effects on matter and the human body. I quickly established a career. At the age of 30, I was already in charge of some analysis and research projects. Between salary and private consultancy that I did a little on my own, I was able to set aside a large amount of money in a few years. Several sentimental but short-lived relationships, maximum 6 months, had made me realize that I was not yet ready for a lasting relationship. Everything was going smoothly, except the death of my mother, which occurred immediately after the end of the Masters. A tragedy for me. How much I suffered and how much I miss her. One day, I had to review the data of research into a new artificial food additive created by a huge food corporation. It was a substance with a semi-protein structure, with a flavor that is very reminiscent of vanilla and cream with a sweet toasted aroma. Hard to explain, but trust me, absolutely delicious. The potential of this substance was enormous. It would have invaded the food market imposing this new flavor. After a few weeks, I wake up one morning and a strange phenomenon happened again. I have the impression that my mind splits. A dialogue begins between the two parts. One of them reminds the other that among all the data I had read, there were some cases of animals that had developed a degenerative neurological syndrome, and which, even if different in manifestation, it reminded me of the bovine spongiform encephalopathy, the so-called mad cow disease. While having breakfast, the most rational part of this splitting thinks that 2 cases out of all tested animals were very few. I try to make peace and recompose the 2 parts of my mind, but I am curious to know if there is a connection, the flea in the ear. I decide to do some tests myself, trying to see how the substance behaves in the stomach environment, recreating it in the lab. I discover that a small percentage of this substance degrades, forming a protein with a shape and structure that resembles prions. For the uninitiated, prions are proteins that have the ability to cause damage to the body. This degradation occurs, as I said, in small quantities. There are probably factors that influence its production in the stomach, for example, the co-presence of particular foods, pH, or who knows what else. Further studies would be needed, both to determine the quantity that is formed and to determine if this degradation causes damage. I write a preliminary report, and I send it to the director of the laboratory and also to the manufacturing corporation, reminding them that, once ready, I would send the full report to the FDA, Food and Drug Administration. This was an immediate bombshell.